On Valentine's Day night, I waited for Caspian for a full 3 hours, all the way until 3 a.m., but he still didn't show up. By sheer coincidence, I later discovered that he had spent the evening with his first love, proposing to her. It turned out they had made a pact that, if they were still single after 6 years, they would get back together. Reflecting on the numerous lies he had told me, I realized in my heart that he had been deceiving me all along, despite promising to take me on a wonderful date. I smiled and pretended to be fine, but inside I was heartbroken. I then decided to accept the advances of my childhood friend. At the French restaurant, I waited for Caspian for 3 hours. Despite making countless calls and sending numerous texts, I never received a reply. Trying to suppress my anger, I convinced myself to enjoy the candlelit dinner alone. After finishing the meal, I felt restless and began scrolling through short videos. By chance, I stumbled upon a live stream. On the screen, a man in a black suit was kneeling in the middle of a heart-shaped arrangement of roses, holding up a ring to propose to a beautiful woman in a white dress. Her eyes were brimming with tears of joy, and deeply moved, she accepted the ring. Amid the cheers of the crowd, the two embraced and kissed affectionately. Although the man's face wasn't visible, his back looked eerily familiar, resembling Caspian. Just as I was about to confirm my suspicion, the live stream abruptly ended. I could only keep my doubts buried in my heart. By the time it was 3 a.m., Caspian still hadn't returned. He had neither responded to my texts nor answered my calls. It seemed he had completely forgotten about our plans for the night. Observing the couples around me, I felt a surge of anger and decided to return home alone. The following day, around noon, Caspian finally came back to the apartment. As soon as he saw me, he rushed over and hugged me tightly. "I'm sorry, my dear. I couldn't make it last night. There was too much going on at the hospital and I had to work overtime." "Let go," I said, struggling to break free from his embrace. My anger had not yet subsided. Sensing my displeasure, Caspian tightened his hold on me and placed a gift box in my hands. "My dear, this is your New Year's gift from me," he said softly. "This time, it's truly special. I stayed up all night preparing it. Can you forgive me? I really love you." His voice was filled with exhaustion. Observing the dark circles under his eyes and his pale complexion, I remained silent. Seeing that I was not growing angrier, Caspian quickly opened the gift box and placed a platinum necklace around my neck. "This necklace suits you perfectly. It looks especially beautiful when you wear it," he said. "Baby, I'm sorry for letting you down this time. Next time I have a holiday, I'll plan a better date for you, okay?" His gaze was sincere, and I couldn't help but soften. "Let's call this a pass. But if this happens again, we're breaking up." Caspian immediately promised it wouldn't happen again. "Absolutely no next time," he said. After clarifying things, we returned to our usual routine. Caspian yawned and went to his room to catch up on sleep. Taking this opportunity, I quickly searched online for the price of the necklace, intending to gift him something of equal value later. To my surprise, I discovered that this necklace wasn't sold separately. It was part of a set given away with a pair of diamond rings worth hundreds of thousands. In comparison, the value of the necklace was insignificant. The images from the live stream I had seen the night before flashed through my mind, and a wave of unease surged within me. I ran to the bathroom and rummaged through the clothes Caspian had changed out of, but found nothing. Then, I walked into the room and saw Caspian sleeping soundly. His handsome face looked completely unguarded. I quietly unlocked his phone and checked it, only to find it completely clean, so spotless that it made me doubt whether I was overthinking. However, deep down, I knew I wasn't imagining things. The mystery of the ring's whereabouts lingered in my mind. When Caspian woke up, he told me he had to go to work again. Looking troubled, he explained that the hospital was extremely busy and short-staffed, making it impossible for him to take a break. He asked for my understanding. I didn't respond, merely watching him drive away through the window. Shortly after, I called a taxi and followed him. Caspian's car stopped in front of a hotel. Not long after, a tall, elegant woman walked out. It was the same woman I had seen in the live stream the previous night. Caspian greeted her warmly, and they began chatting intimately, even sharing a kiss in the sunlight. A sparkling object on his finger caught my eye, a diamond ring. I realized he had deliberately hidden it in the car to prevent me from finding it at home. In that moment, I felt as though I had fallen into an abyss. No matter how much I wanted to deny it, the evidence of Caspian's betrayal was undeniable. I watched as he gently escorted the woman into the car. They drove off and eventually stopped in front of a French restaurant. Hand in hand, they entered the restaurant like a loving couple. The sight made me cover my mouth, trying desperately not to cry. This was the same man who, on our anniversary, had promised to love me forever and had even talked about marriage by our next anniversary. Now everything had changed. 5 years of love had become a cruel joke. Feeling utterly drained, I somehow managed to get home. Lying on the sofa, I cried uncontrollably, letting all my sadness and pain pour out. I knew Caspian wouldn't be coming back that night. After a long time, as I gradually calmed down, countless questions swirled in my mind. When did Caspian start betraying me? How did they meet? How long had they been together? I opened a short video app and searched for local marriage proposals. To my surprise, I easily found the woman's account. Their videos were trending, with countless comments wishing them a happy and harmonious relationship, as well as blessings for 100 years of happiness and early children. Everything in front of me blurred as tears streamed down my face. Although the man in the videos never showed his face, I knew it was Caspian. From the captions, I roughly pieced together their story. We once missed each other due to circumstances, but we agreed that if we were still unmarried after 6 years, we would reunite. In the end, after all the twists and turns, it's still you. First love, happiness. I couldn't help but laugh bitterly in anger. Indeed, Caspian was still unmarried, only dating. Wiping away my tears, I resolved to put an end to everything. I sent Caspian a message. Didn't you say you wanted to make it up to me with a date? Let's meet at the French restaurant tomorrow evening. If you don't show up this time, we're breaking up. After sending the message, I began packing my belongings. I took what I needed, discarded what I didn't, and threw the couple's necklace directly into the trash. Then, I left the apartment overnight, taking a bus to my parents' house. Caspian later replied, agreeing to the date. I didn't respond, knowing he would find an empty table waiting for him. This thought brought me both relief and sadness. Sadness for the 5 years of my youth that had been wasted. To distract myself, I put on makeup, changed into a fresh outfit, and went to a nearby bar to drown my sorrows. With a friend's company, I drank endlessly, trying to forget my pain. The last thing I remembered was being carried home, hearing my mom complain about how I had acted recklessly. Really, Finn, thank you for helping, she said. The next day, I woke up with a splitting headache. When I opened my phone, it was flooded with messages and missed calls from Caspian. His most recent text, sent at 4 a.m., read, "Where are you?" I waited all night. "Why haven't you shown up? And why is everything in the house gone?" Smirking, I coldly sent him the photos I had secretly taken of the proposal video, accompanied by a long string of curses. Then, I blocked all his contact information. After doing so, I felt a sense of relief, though traces of sadness lingered. I spent the following days idly at home, slowly processing the breakup and the pain it caused. One day there was a knock at my window. "Serafina, come out and play." The familiar voice belonged to Finn, my childhood friend. When I opened the window, his handsome face greeted me. "You've been back for so long. Why haven't you gone out?" he asked with concern. "I don't want to go out," I replied weakly. He stepped closer, studying my face. "What's wrong?" he asked gently. My swollen eyes betrayed that I had been crying. "It's nothing, just a breakup," I said, trying to sound nonchalant. Finn's lips curled into a slight smile, his eyes sparkling mischievously. "A breakup just means you're free to find someone better," he teased. I nodded, trying to end the conversation, but as I turned away, Finn's voice stopped me. "So, what do you think of me?" I was stunned. Thinking I had misheard him, I turned and stared at him in disbelief. "Are you joking?" I asked. Finn's expression turned serious. "I'm not joking. I'm serious." "Have you ever considered me?" he asked. Confused and caught off guard, I stammered, "But I just broke up." "Don't you mind?" Finn shook his head and smiled. "I don't mind. I've liked you for years," he admitted. Silence hung between us. In the end, I didn't agree to a new relationship with Finn, as I didn't have the energy for one. Yet Finn visited me daily, bringing flowers, childhood pastries, and even his family's puppy to lift my spirits. Slowly, I found my defenses crumbling. One day when Finn asked, "Serafina, would you like to go for a walk together?" I finally nodded, agreeing to take the first step toward healing. His smile was warm and genuine, with happiness shining in his eyes. We walked together along the park's path, and Finn gently held my hand. I didn't resist. Suddenly, a familiar and angry voice interrupted the moment. I turned to see Caspian standing nearby. I hadn't expected him to find my house. He stormed over, fury etched on his face, raising his fist as if to strike Finn. I quickly stepped in front of Finn, demanding, "What are you planning to do?" Caspian's anger intensified as he gritted his teeth and retorted, "What do you think I'm going to do? Of course, I want to punch this scoundrel." His words annoyed me, but they also made me want to laugh. Caspian," I said, "how dare you even ask me?" If I hadn't found out in time, I'd have ended up as the mistress in someone else's marriage. His face turned pale, and he stammered, You have to let me explain." He looked pathetic at that moment. I dismissed him impatiently, saying, "Explain what?" "Get out of my sight. I don't ever want to see you again." Caspian, trembling with anger, pointed at Finn and declared, "If I have to leave, then he has to leave too." Tightening my grip on Finn's hand, I coldly responded, "Let me make this clear. The one who needs to leave is you. He's my boyfriend now." Caspian shouted, "I never agreed to break up." I smirked coldly and looked at him with disdain. "You're already planning a wedding, and yet you claim you didn't agree to break up? Are you trying to have it both ways?" He fell silent, unable to reply. I shot him a frosty glare and said, "Don't ever show your face in front of me again. Just the sight of you makes me sick." Caspian finally softened, lowering his head and speaking in a subdued voice. "I know I was wrong. I never intended to marry her. Since you left, I've realized I can't live without you. My feelings for her weren't love. They were greed." He lifted his head, his eyes full of regret and pleading. "Serafina, I shouldn't have hurt you. Can you give me another chance?" "Of course not," I replied firmly, rolling my eyes. "You don't deserve it." Caspian silently stared at me, and I refused to look at him any longer. Grabbing Finn's hand, I prepared to leave, but Caspian blocked our path, his eyes fixed on our joined hands, as if trying to decipher something. Finn, unable to endure it, let go of my hand and moved toward Caspian. Alarmed, I quickly intervened, shoving Caspian aside and snapping, "Move! Good dogs don't block the road!" "I'm not leaving!" Caspian shouted, his face red with rage. "Serafina, I'm telling you again, I didn't agree to break up." "Who cares about your agreement?" I replied, irritated, and pulled Finn away. This time, Caspian didn't follow. He stood there looking defeated, but I didn't care. The next day, Caspian showed up at my house with a pile of gifts. I grabbed a broom, ready to chase him away, but my mom stopped me, confused. "What's going on? Why are you chasing him off?" "Mom, he's nothing but a scumbag," I said. Caspian interrupted, suddenly kneeling down with a loud thud. "Auntie, I was foolish and made mistakes with Serafina. I've come to apologize and beg for forgiveness." He bowed 3 times as he spoke. My mom, bewildered, asked, "What kind of mistake requires you to kneel like this? Stand up and explain." Caspian glanced at me before replying, "Auntie, I won't stand until Serafina forgives me." I scoffed and dragged my mom into the kitchen, where I told her everything. Hearing the full story, my mom was livid. She grabbed the broom and stormed out, yelling, "Get out of here! You're not welcome! Auntie, please!" Caspian tried to explain, but my mom wasn't having it. She swung the broom at him, forcing him to dodge awkwardly. "I know I was wrong. Please give me another chance," he pleaded. When he still wouldn't leave, my mom aimed the broom at his face. This finally drove him away. She tossed out all the gifts and locked the door. Later, I peeked over the wall and saw him still kneeling outside. Furious, I noticed the commotion had drawn neighbors. They gathered around, curious, and upon learning what had happened, some even sympathized with him. "He seems truly sorry," one said. "Let him in to warm up. It's winter." But I ignored them and called the police. When the officers arrived, Caspian reluctantly stood and complied. As he was escorted away, he glanced back at me, his eyes filled with regret. Finn arrived shortly after, concerned. "Next time, call me right away," he said seriously. I nodded in agreement. After he left, my mom questioned me about my relationship with Finn, and I confessed the truth. She nodded approvingly. "Finn's a good man. You're both old enough. Why not get engaged?" The idea surprised me, but I agreed. Finn was happy to proceed, and we planned a simple engagement banquet with a few tables and festive decorations. On the big day, dressed in celebratory red, we toasted with family and friends. Suddenly, the courtyard gate burst open and Caspian stormed in, his eyes wild. He knocked over everything in his path, heading straight for us. My family and friends, already aware of his behavior, quickly subdued him. I called the police again. As I watched him being restrained, anger from all the betrayal and turmoil resurfaced. I marched up and slapped him hard across the face. Stunned, he looked at me, tears forming in his eyes. "You hit me," he murmured, sounding hurt. I stared at him coldly. "Yes, I did. You deserved it." Flustered, he lowered his head, trying to hide his tears. The police arrived soon after, and Caspian, looking utterly defeated, answered their questions without resistance. As they led him away, he didn't look back. I exhaled deeply, relieved that this time, Caspian would finally stay out of my life. With him no longer interfering, Finn and I enjoyed a lovely and peaceful vacation. Once the trip ended, I decided it was time to stop living so leisurely and began searching for a new job. After several rounds of interviews, I landed a position at a public company and started my 9 to 5 routine. However, my calm routine was unexpectedly disrupted again. One day, my desk was suddenly covered with gifts, flowers, designer handbags, and jewelry. I immediately texted Finn to ask if he had sent them, but he denied it. In that instant, I knew exactly who was responsible. After work, I gathered all the gifts into a large trash bag, determined to throw them away. As I stepped outside the building, I was greeted by the unwelcome sight of Caspian. He was impeccably dressed in formal clothes, his hair neatly slicked back, accentuating his sharp and refined features. He approached me with a pleasant smile as if nothing had ever happened. In a soft tone, he greeted me, "Darling, was work tiring today? I reserved a private dining room. Let's go have dinner." Staring at him in disbelief, I blurted out, "Caspian, have you completely lost your mind?" His face fell slightly, and with a hint of sadness, he asked, "Why would you say that? What did I do wrong?" Too frustrated to argue, I responded sharply, "What is it that you really want? Why don't you spend your time chasing after your first love instead of bothering me all day?" Caspian blinked, looking both hurt and confused. What are you talking about? What first love? I've only ever been with you." I glared at him skeptically, and with wide, earnest eyes, he added, "My first love has always been you, Serafina. There has never been anyone else." His words left me bewildered. Observing him closely, I realized he wasn't faking. He genuinely believed what he was saying. It dawned on me that something was deeply wrong with him. I decided not to press the issue further and focused on distancing myself from him. Handing him the bag of gifts, I casually said I had somewhere to be and turned to leave. But before I could walk away, Caspian grabbed my hand tightly. "Don't go," he pleaded. Annoyed, I turned back and demanded, "Let go." His lips were pressed into a stubborn line, and he refused to release me. Growing increasingly uneasy, I noticed his phone ringing persistently, but he ignored it completely. At that moment, I heard distant voices calling out, "Son! Son!" I turned to see an older couple walking toward us. They resembled Caspian slightly. The woman hurried over, grabbed his arm, and said, "Son, it looks like you've forgotten your medication again. Come home with Mom." "I'm not going," Caspian protested firmly. The man beside her frowned and said sternly, "You're not well. You need to come back with us." While they tried to pull him away, I quickly freed my hand and attempted to leave. "Don't go!" Caspian's voice sounded desperate behind me. "Serafina, please don't leave." I heard hurried footsteps and felt a tug on my sleeve. Turning around, I saw Caspian's mother, her worried face full of concern. "You must be Serafina," she said. "Ever since he came back from your house, he's been like this. Please, can you help him? I'm begging you." Feeling uneasy, I immediately declined. "He needs professional help. Go to a hospital. I'm not a doctor." Her eyes filled with desperation. "We'll give you anything, money, a house, a car. Just help him. I'll give you anything you want." Despite her plea, I shook my head. Her tears began to flow as she sobbed, "I'm begging you. Please save him." Before I could react, she started to kneel. Alarmed, I quickly stopped her, supporting her to keep her from kneeling. Still, she clung to me tightly, refusing to let go. Her husband stood nearby, silently watching, his gaze pleading. Just as I was feeling completely trapped, Finn arrived. Without hesitation, Finn pulled me away and stood protectively in front of me. In a calm but firm tone, he addressed them. "Sir, ma'am, Serafina has moved on. She has a new life now. Please stop disrupting her. This is something professionals should handle. The couple fell silent at his words. But Caspian suddenly lunged forward in anger. What gives you the right to speak for Serafina? He roared. Finn, unflustered, replied with a hint of sarcasm, And what right do you have? Caspian's face paled, and in a fit of rage, he swung his fist at Finn. But Finn swiftly dodged, grabbing Caspian's arm and pinning him to the ground with ease. The situation unfolded so quickly that everyone was left stunned. Finn addressed Caspian's parents calmly but firmly. Your son's mental state is unstable, and he's a danger to others. If you don't take responsibility for him, I'll call the police. He may end up being forced into treatment. Caspian's mother hurriedly reassured him, We won't let this happen again. I promise. His father sighed heavily and made a phone call. Shortly after, a black car pulled up, and a group of bodyguards stepped out. They restrained Caspian and carried him into the car. As they drove away, Caspian yelled, I don't want to leave! I want Serafina! His father slapped him hard, shouting, Enough! Turning to Finn and me, he solemnly promised, We'll keep him under constant watch and take him abroad for treatment. He won't disturb you again. Finn nodded. I trust you'll keep your word. Without another word, they got into the car and left. The sudden silence was a relief. I looked at Finn and said, Thank goodness you arrived when you did. I don't know how much more of that family I could have handled. Finn smiled gently, his gaze full of affection. So, how will you reward me? He teased. Taking his hand, I smiled and replied, How about we go on a date? He held my hand tightly and agreed softly. From that day on, Caspian never bothered us again. Finn and I chose a lucky day to register our marriage, leaving the shadows of the past behind and starting a peaceful, happy life together.